Hello everyone, it's Space Chaser again. Welcome to another video. This is another model review where I look at some of the older models that are available on the second-hand market. And today we've got another of the EFE Leyland Nationals. I know I've done quite a few national reviews before, but as I have mentioned in those reviews, there were 14 different variations of EFE National. That was between the long wheelbase and the short wheelbase, the Mark 1 and the Mark 2, the different types of pod, the early pod, the late pod, no pod at all, single door, dual door. If you mix and match those features, you've got 14 different variations. Up to press, I've done 5 of those variations, all Mark 1 vehicles. I've done the short version with 1 door and a late pod. I've done the short version with 1 door and no pod, in other words, the B Series National. I've done the short version with 2 doors and late pod. I've done the long version with 1 door and late pod. And I've done the 2 door version with the early pod, the long 2 door version with the early pod as well. That one was the EFE Road version, the one that Batman have released more recently, but still the old EFE casting. I will put links in the description to this video to all of those, so you can watch all of those if you want to. But in this one I'm doing the Mark II version of the National, and then I've done kind of all the different main variations. You'd have to mix and match if you've got one that I haven't done, for example a long Mark II with no pod. Just have a look at the short Mark II with no pod, and then the longer version of the EFE Mark 1 kind of thing. You can mix and match, and you can make up the 14 different variations from the 6 reviews I've done, including this one. So what we've got today, we've got 2 of the Leyland National 2 models. We've got 14701, catalogue number, the McGills of Barrhead version, released in June 1993. That was the first Mark II National that EFE released. And we've also got 14901, the York Cityrider version, released in December 1997. The McGills one has a pod, and the York Cityrider one is the B Series without the roof pod, as you can see there. B Series Nationals had a normal heating system, whereas the A Series, as they were known, the ones with the pod, had the heating system was in the pod, whereas the B Series had a normal heating system mounted on the floor. So the versions of the Mark II National weren't as numerous as the Mark 1s. The short version of it, they did 7 different releases, some with 1 door, some with 2 doors, some with a pod, some without. And they were released between June 1993 and April 2015. And there are also 20 versions of the long Mark II National, again some with pods, some without, released between September 1998 and December 2015. So what we're going to do in this video, I'll have a look around, I'll explain the history of this vehicle, LUA 314V, the one that EFE have modelled on this one. Then we'll explain the title of the video, the model that inspired the rail bus. That relates to the McGills one, so I'll explain all that. Then we'll have to look around the model. I'll do the McGills one in full detail, and then we'll have a quick whiz around the York one afterwards, just show you the differences on that one, the B Series version. And then we'll talk about the price if you want to add one to your collection. So the York Cityrider one, as you can probably just about see there, is registration number LUA 314V. So the rail vehicle was new to West Yorkshire PTE, Passenger Transport Executive, in April of 1980, fleet number 1314. It was allocated initially to Huddersfield and it moved to Leeds after a short time. In the mid-80s, the PTEs were compelled to set up what were known as arm's length companies, so they were run like a normal private company, but the PTE held all the shares. West Yorkshire's version was called Yorkshire Rider, and so 1314 found itself working for Yorkshire Rider Leeds. The West Yorkshire PTE had used a green and cream livery, a light green colour known as Verona green, and just a normal cream. Yorkshire Rider used green and cream as well, but different shades. The cream, as you can see, was an almost yellow shade known as jonquil, and the green was both darker and more vivid, and it was known as brilliant green. So these were the colours that Yorkshire Rider adopted. 1314 had this rather unique version of the livery. The standard version, this green band went much lower, and then there was a narrower jonquil band underneath it. But 1314 had this very thin green band painted. It also in real life had a white bumper at the front, but that's not represented on the EFE model. But yeah, it was this version of delivery. It wasn't quite unique to 1314, but not very many buses carried it, so it was unusual, and it was also a bit of an acquired taste. In 1990, Yorkshire Rider bought York City and District from the AJS Group. Yorkshire Rider had been privatised in 1988. It was sold to its management and employees. And in 1990, as I said, they bought York City and District from the AJS Group. AJS also owned Harrogate and District, Keighley and District, and Yorkshire Coastliner, who went on. AJS was renamed North of England Travel Group, then Blazefield Holdings, then it merged with Transdev, and today you've got Harrogate Bus Company, Keighley Bus Company, and Coastliner as well, still on the go and going from strength to strength. Unfortunately, the York operation was loss-making. They'd done various things to try and get it to make money, including stopping running on a Sunday and cutting back the evening services to the bare bone, but it hadn't worked, so they sold it to Yorkshire Rider in 1990. With it came a subsidiary known as Target Travel, who had been an independent company for all of a few weeks, and then York City and Districts had bought them, and Yorkshire Rider also bought Reynard Bus, which was the bus operating part of the Reynard Pullman organisation. They initially kept Target Travel and Reynard Bus as separate entities with their own livery. But for the City and District vehicles, they started to paint them immediately into the normal Yorkshire Rider brilliant green and jonquil colours. The first ones to be repainted and the first ones to be transferred from the main Yorkshire Rider fleet carried the York City and District fleet name. But after a very, very short time, they adopted the name York Cityrider for those operations, which is what's carried by the EFE model. You can see the large York and the smaller Cityrider. It was a very, very short-lived fleet name. It started in late 1990, as I say. In early 1992, they abolished Target Travel and Reynard Bus as separate entities. They started to paint those buses in the normal livery. And they also rebranded everything, including the York Cityrider fleet, to Rider York. So it was very, very short-lived, this, as I say, late 1990 to early 1992. I've not actually seen any photographs of 1314 operating in York in this livery, but I'm assuming it did because EFE tended to base the models on photographs. I've seen pictures of it in this livery with Yorkshire Rider Leeds fleet names working out of Leeds, and I've seen pictures of it in the normal livery with a bigger, deeper green band, as I say, and Rider York fleet names, but I've not seen any of it running. But again, it must have been based on something, so we'll take EFE's word that it's a correct model. Just to bring the story of Leyland 314V up to its conclusion, in around 1995-1996 it was sold to Travel de Courcy, Mike de Courcy Travel of Coventry, and I believe that they were its last operator. It was still on the fleet list for York in May 1995, but it had gone. There's pictures of it in Coventry by sort of the end of 1996. It was sometime between then that it went there. So, the model that inspired a rail bus. Now here we go. There was a bit of disquiet when this model came out in 1993 because it was incorrect. McGills had bought quite a few Leyland Nationals, Mark 1s and Mark 2s, but all of them were the longer wheelbase version, the 11 metre version, 11.3 metres for the Mark 1, 11.6 metres for the Mark 2. The Mark 2 was 30 centimetres longer because it had a front mounted radiator which stuck out a bit, as opposed to the Mark 1 which had a rear mounted radiator and the famous sort of fan behind the grille that you could see on the back. So McGills had bought some Mark 2s brand new. We don't know which one EFE were trying to represent because McGills didn't use fleet numbers at this time, and EFE standard releases back in the early 90s didn't have registration plates. They only put registration plates on deluxe models, as they called them, but they didn't do a deluxe version of the McGills one. So obviously with no fleet number and no registration number, you can't tell which one it was supposed to be. The buses that McGills bought, the Mark II Leyland Nationals, were UGE 388 and 389W, BHS 206 and 207X, B724 and 725 AGD, and C263 and 264 FGG. So it's one of those. You can't even tell by the Leyland scroll on the front because looking at pictures, most of those buses carried the Leyland just lettering, plain lettering, and the Leyland scroll at various times. It seems that McGills swapped the front panels over quite regularly. So there's pictures of all of the buses really carrying both normal Leyland lettering and at different times the Leyland scroll. So we can't tell by the scroll which one it was supposed to be either. But anyway, the model was released and there was a lot of disquiet, as I say, among enthusiasts because it was wrong. It was a 10-metre version of the Leyland National, not the 11-metre. In fairness, EFE would have had to wait 5 years to 1998 before they released the first of the longer wheelbase Mark IIs in their range to do a correct one, but it does seem odd that they rushed out the McGill's model and just did it the wrong length. However, what McGills did have was a bus registered KRS 536V. It wasn't its original registration number. It had been new to Alexander Northern, who traded by that stage as Northern Scottish, in March 1980 as fleet number NPN2. And it was registered at the time GSO2V, back in the day when the DVLA used to issue such marks as standard registration numbers and not keep them back for cherished ones. Northern Scottish sold it in 1991 to McGills, but by that stage they've realised how valuable a registration like GSO2V would be, so they kept the registration. They re-registered the bus before they sold it, KRS 536V. They kept the registration mark went onto a Leyland Olympian coach, incidentally, and the re-registered bus, as I say, was sold to McGills in 1991. Now, KRS 536V looked like this. It was a B series, so it didn't have a roof pod, and it did have number blinds. McGill's buses, you can see on this model, didn't. They didn't show service numbers, so they didn't have number reels. They just came with a big destination blind as supplied new. So that's how McGill's ones looked. But as I say, KRS had the normal arrangement from Northern Scottish, where it had number reels on this side of the blind and the destination, and as we said, it didn't have a roof pod. However, shortly after the EFE model appeared in 1993, KRS 536V vanished into the workshops at Muriel Street Depot in Barrhead. And when it came back out again, it looked like this. The number reels had been taken away and it only had the sort of central destination blind, as did the ones that had been supplied new to McGill's, and it had been fitted with a dummy roof pod. So it had a pod on it. It looked like an A series to all intents and purposes, but the pod was dummy. It didn't need it for the heating. It was just basically stuck onto the roof. And the rumour was, and still is, that it was done so that they had a bus that actually matched the EFE model, so it made the EFE model authentic. I am slightly sceptical, and the reason for that is they also had a Mark 1 B Series National registered AAK 112T that they bought in 1989 from Summerbus of Poulton in Somerset. It had been new to South Yorkshire Passenger Transport Executive, but they bought it. Before they put it in service, they rebuilt it, and they actually fitted that one with a dummy roof pod as well. Now obviously there was no need to do that. It was long before the EFE model was even thought of, so it wasn't done to match anything. So it's only the fact they did that one as well. I mean, it may well be the case that KRS 536V was rebuilt so it did resemble the EFE model. It'd be interesting to hear from anybody who worked for McGill's at the time to know if that actually was the reason. If anybody could let me know in the comments, that'd be brilliant. Just to assume it is KRS 536V, the history of the rail bus, McGill's sold out to Arriva Scotland West in July 1997 and KRS 536V passed to Arriva. It was sold on in a very short time to Signet Travel of Darton in South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire boundary. They wasted no time in taking the dummy roof pod back off again because obviously it didn't serve any purpose. It just added to the unladen weight of the vehicle, somewhat unnecessarily. By 2001 it had been sold to Dunline of Nottingham, but it had been put into their Stevenson's fleet in Spath, and I think they were its last owners. It doesn't seem to have appeared anywhere since then. So we'll have a look around the model. As I've said before, I'm a fan of the EFE Leyland National. Some people are not, but I really like it. I think it's a good model, especially allowing for the fact it's over 30 years old. However, the Mark II is a bit rubbish. And the main problem with it is the front end. So I'm going to show you the front end last on this bus. We'll deal with the better bits first. So looking at the side, it looks pretty good. The detailing is a bit clunky, but then it was on a Rail National. They were quite industrial looking, so it looks pretty realistic. The doors, as I've always said on these Leyland National reviews, the centre pillar is part of the casting. The side pillars are part of the glazing unit and just picked out in paint. EFE did tend to miss those sometimes, as modelled on the York version. You can see that they've failed to paint the pillars, giving a really weird effect. You can do it quite easily. Obviously they're raised up, you just pick them out in paint. But the difficulty on this one is obviously mixing a shade of jonquil. You have to mix cream and yellow together till you get the right effect. Otherwise than that, the side looks pretty decent. Being an early release, the windows are not picked out, the opening windows. They're moulded on the glazing unit, but they're not actually picked out in silver or anything, unlike on the later ones. The wheels correctly are painted grey. I'm not quite sure the shade is correct on the wheels. The upper works there are pretty decent. That's a decent representation of the shade. But they look a tad light to the wheels, so they might benefit from being repainted. Legal lettering there, unladen weight, all nice to see. The standard problem on an EFE National that the back axle is too short and therefore the wheels sit in too far from the body side. EFE Road backmen have corrected that on their more recent releases. They've put a proper length axle in so the wheels sit in the correct place. But on the normal EFE releases, the Gilbow era, the vast majority of them, the axle is too short. It does give a slightly weird look. It looks almost like the bus is on casters or has been crossed with a Reliant Robin. Going around to the back, pretty reasonable. All the EFE ones have got this lens thing on the back window. Most Nationals in real life didn't have it, but the one that EFE originally measured and photographed did have. It was to help the driver when reversing. It just gave them a better view of the road behind. But as I say, most Nationals didn't have it. I don't think the McGills ones had it on. The upper works are quite good. The shape of the roof there, the recess panel on this one where there's a McGill's fleet name, all very nice. The area on the back window looks good. The shape is correct. The lights look decent. The part of the casting. The back of this one is correctly flat. Some National 2s had a bit of a recess for the registration plate, but I don't think this one did. So that is correct. Obviously there's no registration number because it's an early release. There's no grille on this one, as there shouldn't be. Mark IIs didn't have a grille at the back. As I said, they did have a front mounted radiator, so the back should be smooth. There was a mistake made by EFE on some of the releases. The Colchester ones, the long Mark IIs for Colchester, they had a back panel off a Mark I with the moulded square, the cast-in square, that would be painted black normally to represent the grille at the back. That was there on those present, so that was a mistake on those models. There may be other Mark IIs that have that mistake as well, but I'm not aware of which ones they are. It's not insurmountable. I mean, you did occasionally find Mark II Nationals with a Mark I back end with a grille, which obviously didn't do anything, but they just the operator had a Mark I grille sat spare and just bunged it on basically. But yeah, this one's correct anyway. It's got the correct flat grille and the bumper area looks quite nice. There's a bit of scuffing of the paint there, just covered it over with some white paint. Go around to the offside, not much to report. Again, the back axle is too short, as we mentioned on the near side. But it's all pretty decent. The emergency exit door handle is cast in. There's a little recess for it to sit in. That looks good. Fuel fillers picked out. Again, that's all recessed. Looks very nice indeed. Got the battery isolator letter in there correctly, and it all looks pretty good. The roof of an EFE National always pretty reasonable, except on the B series. I'll come to that in a bit. But yeah, the moulded panel lines along the roof there look really good. The pod is good. The vents are all cast into it as they should be, the little recess bits, and the overall shape of it is pretty much spot on accurate. Not much going on underneath the EFE National. As I've said in all the other reviews, you've got a little bit of the suspension detail, a little bit of the underside of the engine, but not a lot else. Picked out in body colour as well. If you're displaying it on a hill, you know, so it's stood up like that, you might want to just paint that black so it doesn't shine up at you. But all in all, it is quite reasonable up to there. The interior, not that you can see it because it's moulded in black on this one, but again, it's pretty good. It would benefit from taking the bus apart and giving it a paint to bring out the detail. There is some moulded detail on the seats. We'll see that clearer on the York one because it's done in a lighter colour. But yeah, all in all, pretty decent. And then we go wrong because we get round to the front end. So the upper front is pretty good. It's the same as the Mark I. The roof section is exactly the same. It's interchangeable between the two. So again, you've got the shape is correct. The archetypal destination blind in the middle. These two little glaze panels at the edges, all looking really good. And then it goes wrong after that. The National 2 had a much more bulbous front end. The windscreen was a BET style. Whereas what EFE have done is they've used the same windscreen as the Mark 1, which it curves in the right directions, but it's not curved enough, if you know what I mean. So it's too flat basically, it doesn't look correct. It's not correct for the Mark 2. But yeah, that is an EFE windscreen off a Bristol VR. That's a BET screen, that's what the National should have, as opposed to what it's actually got. As you can see, the BET screen is a lot more curved. And there is a photo of a National 2, that's what the front should look like. So you can see the window is very, very curved indeed, as is the actual front end. Whereas if you contrast it to the EFE model, you can see it's far too flat. The windscreen, as I say, is shared with the Mark 1. It is too flat for the Mark 2, and it just doesn't look right. The step here in the front end is correct, but then the front end itself is too flat. It just doesn't come out far enough. It doesn't stick out far enough. It's not curved enough. It looks a bit like a National 2 that's been driven into a wall slowly and just had its front end pushed back in. It really doesn't capture the look of the thing at all. It's a bit of a shame because they've gone to the lengths of putting the grille in underneath the Leyland letter in there. You can see the two parts of the grille, and they've tried to make it the correct kind of features and things, but it just doesn't look, as I say, right. It's far too flat. As I say, it looks like the bus has just been driven very slowly into a concrete wall and had its front pushed back in. It doesn't stick out far enough, as you can see. The profile of that there, and just compare it to the rail bus there, it just doesn't capture the look, and it does let the bus down massively. As I always say on these reviews, the front end is the most important part of it, because that's the bit that you see in your display case. Generally, if it's on a layout or a diorama, it's with the front out, and if the front doesn't look right, which this doesn't, it just lets the whole thing down, and it really is a shame. We'll have a quick whiz round the York one. So again, the front is you know, too flat, but it's a bit more disguised on this one because of the paint colours. It does look a little bit more disguised. They've picked out the grille there in black on the green bit as well, which is a nice touch. And this one, being a slightly later release, has got registration plates on it as well. A nice feature on both of them that I've not really mentioned as well is the fog lights. You can see what would be a hole on the rail bus is just painted in black, and the fog lights are picked out in it, so they do look quite effective. They look quite good. Another difference between the two, this one being an early release, has got the windscreen wipers and the divider for the windscreen moulded on but not picked out, whereas this one, again being slightly later, it's got the wipers picked out in black and the divider picked out in silver, which is a nice feature. It's on Route 8A to Heslington, York local route. So go around the side, again, pretty much the same as the McGill's one. We've mentioned already that they've forgotten to pick out the door pillars. You need to do that yourself. As I say, they are raised. You just run a paintbrush along the raised bit and paint them in. But the difficulty is mixing the correct shade of paint. Side windows still not picked out on this one. It's not quite a late enough release to have that done. They've done the windscreen but not the side windows. But again, the look is pretty decent. The wheels look a bit plasticky because they are moulded in plastic, obviously. But again, if you painted over those in red, the shade's correct, but they just look a bit too plasticky. But yeah, generally it's pretty decent. The lettering is there, the legal lettering in the unladen way, but it's hard to read in the black on the green as it was on the rail bus. And again, the axle is too short. Back is pretty decent. The registration plate, I believe, was in that position on the rail bus. So again, yeah, very nice, not much to complain about there. And again, the offside, the same, not much to say really. It looks pretty reasonable. Underside, not a lot going on. You've got the bright red rivets there contrasting against the cream. Again, that would all benefit from being painted over in black just to tone it down a bit, so that if you do have it stood, you know, a slight uphill angle or something, it's not shining out at you. We'll have a look at the interior on this one. You can more or less see it. You can see there is a bit of detail moulded in the seats there. Look, if you look at the side facing seat on the offside, that you can see through the front window. And again, it would all benefit from just being picked out, detail painted, seat backs in a different colour, etc. Where the B series does tend to go wrong is the roof. This bit of the roof, very good. This bit, not so much. As you can see, there is a sort of panel there where the pod would normally be mounted. Obviously, they've put that in the casting so that the pod is always in the correct place, which is really good. It means the ones with the pod have always got the pod in the right place and not too far forward or hanging off the back. But on these B series, there's like a blanking plate that goes over the recess for it, and it looks terrible. The real buses didn't have that. The roof just continued like this all the way to the back. Obviously with the moulded ridges finished just before the back end, like they do at the front there. But yeah, it looks absolutely awful. There's nothing you can do with it really. You could try and fill all the gaps in with filler and do a load of filing and sanding to try and get the ridges in the filler as well, and but it would look horrendous. You'd still be able to see it, so it does let the appearance down, because obviously being a single decker and being quite small scale, you tend to view it from above and you can see that panel all the time. So yeah, all in all, it's not the best National model. Neither of them are. The Mark II wasn't the best. The Mark I's pretty decent, the Mark II not so much, and the B series ones always look a bit rubbish because of the plate there where the pod would be. So if you want to buy one, how much will it set you back? Well, the prices have come down quite a bit recently because people are not buying models so much with the cost of living crisis, etc. This one cost me about £14 all in from eBay, including postage. I think that was about the same actually. Cheapest one I could find. I'm doing this in mid-January 2025. I've had a look on eBay for the purpose of the video. Cheapest one on there was £9.99 plus £3.99 postage and packing. So £13.98 all in. And that was a McGill's one, oddly enough. The most expensive I could find was £44. That was the short B series in Ribble livery. That's quite sought after. So anywhere in between, you tend to find the EFE Mark IIs are quite expensive as well. Had a quick look at Liz Keith as well, the model shop in Eastbourne. Apologies for the background noise there. There's got somebody revving a motorbike outside the studio, which isn't really helpful. But yeah, Liz Keith, the Eastbourne model shop, the cheapest one they had was £12. That was the London General Red Arrow one with 2 doors, the short version, short Mark II. And the most expensive was a longer Mark II in EFE Cymru livery, EFE Wales in other words, £38 for that one. In both cases with postage on top. Postage at Liz Keith, I think roughly about a fiver. So you're looking at £17 to £43 there. That's your kind of price range. Is it worth getting one? Well, the truth is, if you want a Mark II National, you haven't got much choice really. The only other model available on the market is the Parrot Models kit, if you can track one down. They're not easy to come by. But the problem with the Parrot Models kit, the front end is a lot better. It's the right shape, it's curved enough. But the side, the windows don't have this sort of chamfer underneath them and around them like they did on the Rail National. They're just kind of normal holes in the side of the vehicle. So the sides don't look very good, so you still don't get a model that looks anything like it should do. They are quite expensive. Unbuilt ones tend to set you back somewhere between £25 and £30 upwards. Built ones, yeah, 40, 50, 60, 70, etc. You know, so it's a much more expensive option. If you buy an unbuilt one, you've got to build it, which is always a bit of a hassle. And like I say, it doesn't actually produce a model that looks much better than the EFE one. It might look better at the front, but it doesn't at the sides. So there isn't really a good way to get a National 2 that looks any good. If you could probably find a Parrot Models front end and stick it onto an EFE National, that might give you the best option of all. But again, that would be fiddly to do. So really, if you want one with less hassle and at a decent price, you really are looking at the EFE one. Rapido Trains were going to produce a National and a National 2. Unfortunately, in 2024, they announced that the project was being paused indefinitely, which often is a euphemism for abandoned. And it's a shame because it would have been really nice. But I understand it. Production costs have gone up. In China, transport costs have gone up across the world, so it costs more to get them over here to start with. And then people have got less money. And a Rapido one would probably have been about the same price as their Fleet line. Somewhere between £45 and £60, depending which dealer you bought it from. So, you know, possibly people wouldn't have been minded to buy them as much. It would have been a really good model and nice to see, but for the time being, as I say, if you want a Mark II Leyland National, then the easiest and cheapest way to get one is still to buy the EFE one, even though it's not actually brilliant because of the front end. But, as always, thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.